Hello, budding color pencil artists. I'm Bonita, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of papers, the type of texture and color shading that you can get, and just look at a couple of the different pencil groups that I'm using. I think it can be very confusing if you're just starting and you're looking for materials and you go and just look at colored pencils. There's just so much to pick from. And if you're not sure if you're going to have the patience to continue, then I would recommend you start with something small. Don't get yourself into huge numbers of pencils. You can buy 72 pencils, 36 pencils, 100 pencils. When I started this year, actually with the lockdown, I started drawing again, which I hadn't done in many, many years, but I never worked with colored pencil. The only reason I had this little set was when I was in school years ago. I had an engineer drawing class where we needed to do some houses and rooms and things like that. And this was the set that the teacher recommended we all get for the engineer drawing class. And then I never used them again. I never did all kinds of intricate color shading or drawing. This is the Derwent 36 color pencil, and it's not expensive. And they last forever. Although you're going to find that certain colors, you're going to wind down on them very quickly. But I started drawing with this, and then as I got to see that I was going to continue going this time, then I bought the Polychromos. I really like the Polychromos, and I did not get a big collection, but I see no need right now to buy more. I have many, many colors, and you can do a lot with just a few. But I do like the way they go down on the paper, and you'll find that these different pencils do have a different feel to them. And then I did go ahead and get a 72 set. This is the Color. And I have to say, all these brands, I love them all. There's many to pick from, but these are some of the well-known companies. So, but start with a small collection of good pencils. Just like anything else, you don't want to go out and get all kinds of equipment if you find you're too frustrated to continue. And then a couple of different paper choices. You can get a whole different look with the toned papers, and I will show you some of the drawings that I've been doing and the different effects. So I have here in the Strathmore the toned gray. This is the gray. And these toned papers have much more texture than this Bristol board, which we'll look at in a moment. And this is the tan. This does tend to give your drawing more depth right away if you work with a toned paper. So it's something to keep in mind, that you don't always work on white paper. They have a very, very different feeling when you're working with a pencil than this one. Now this is the medium surface toned tan sketch paper Strathmore, the 400 series. These are 11 by 14 that I've been using. And same thing with the gray, it's a medium surface. Now this is a Bristol board, smooth surface, and this is white. And I'll show you what it looks like working on the white paper. Now even on the white, I often don't leave the background white, but I will shade it in. This is very, very smooth. And so the work with the pencils is different amounts of pressure depending on what you're working with. And so this is going to be a short video, just talking a little bit about things in general, not doing a whole tutorial, but just some things to keep in mind as you get started. Pressure is one of the most important things, and I think this is probably true in many things, whether it's kneading dough or playing the piano, is you have to really keep a light hand. And my drawing teacher, when I was at the College of Art in Columbus, Ohio, CCAD is a very fine art college, we started with the hardest lead on our drawings, very, very fine lines, very, very light, and trying to pull back in the amount of pressure, light, and building layers. So we didn't go to the softer leads until very far along in the drawing. The purpose, of course, getting that light touch and building your layers up. I was really actually surprised at what you can do with colored pencil and the effects that you can get, but it's very important that your initial layers, because you are going to do color glazing, and that is you're not going to look at the apple, it's red, and start coloring it in red. You're going to do glazes of color, and each layer that you put down, then you'll find that you can blend the other color into that more easily when you get that into the surface. So you're dealing with the surface texture and how that paper takes the pigment into it. There are times when you'll need to increase the pressure and you need to get a very sharp point and go in for detail. And what I'll do today, I'm going to focus, I think, on bark, different types of bark, because I've been doing a lot of birds. And I'll describe some of the techniques that have been used for the bark, and then for the finishing touches where the pressure will be stronger. But if you start out with heavy pressure, you start out putting a lot of pigment in, you're going to actually crease into the paper, and you're not going to be able to glaze over the top. So these are just some general suggestions, and then we'll take a look. Oh, I didn't talk about the pencil sharpener. I was using a regular pencil sharpener when I first started, but what it generally does is it heats your pencil very quickly and doesn't give you a really sharp point. So I just got these little Derwent hand pencil sharpeners, and you can order replacements also for them. But they will give you a really sharp point, and when they stop giving you a really sharp point, you need to replace the blades. They do wear out pretty quickly. So let's take a look at some of the different barks, and what I'm going to talk about a little bit here is color, and what we call socialized color. It's not like socialism, it's simply the impression we have when we look at something and you see one color. So you look at a banana and you say the banana's yellow or it's green, and the apple is red or it's a green apple. Or you look at someone's hair, they have black hair. If you look deeper, and a great deal of your drawing, and especially when you start talking about color, so we're going into pencil, but also colored pencil. When you're looking into color, you have to learn to look deep and not use the socialized color, which is what you're used to saying, this is that color, I look at that, that's all I see. You look deep into the shadows, and the deeper you look, the more colors you find. And whether you're drawing from life or if you're drawing from a photograph. Now if you're drawing from a photograph, which of course I'm going to do for all my birds, if you have a still life, if you have a leaf laying there, you won't have that type of an issue. You need the bird to stay still. But as the light changes, something's going to change there. So you want to keep, if it's in the light, keep the shadows in the same place, so it's not moving around. But keep looking into those colors of either your still life or your photograph, and see where's the purples and where's the blues, and how can I make a shadow, not with just brown, not with just black or just gray, but how can I bring out the colors. So we're talking about so many things when we talk about color and drawing and art and so on, and I just want to make that point about color, and we're going to look into the bark and see how the color, which is more exaggerated, let's say, in the drawing than it would be in the photograph. So we're drawing very realistic maybe, but there's always an artistic approach to where you can insert more color or more vivid color or exaggerate the light and shade to produce something different that the eye sees. So we're going to take a look at a few of the drawings I've been working on. We all have our own approach to doing whatever we're doing, feathers or fur or bark, but you're also going to have, of course, different subjects. So a pine branch is going to be different than a maple branch, and the kind of light and the time of year. And I'll just talk a little bit about the way I've been using my eye and the way I see it. So also how the paper takes the pencil. Now these two drawings, these are a little bit larger on the Vine Fung Bristol smooth paper. So I've done two different birds here. That's a red pole. These are Ohio birds and fat fluffy robin. And the branches here I've handled in a very different manner. These are both from photographs from wonderful photographers from the Ohio Wildlife Facebook page. And in this one, it was quite a dramatic branch, I thought, when I was looking at it. It was very craggy and lots of interesting things to look at. And so I felt that I needed to really work into this branch to bring it out and make it important. And then you can see the branch at the top here. I wanted these branches, all of them really, to fade into the background. These particularly are to fade into the background, so very, very light. And that one to fade more than the ones that are in the front where the eye is going into the detail. On this one, I don't know exactly what branches. These are branches with some kind of berries, so whether they were bare honeysuckle, I'm not sure, but the branches were not, let's say, as visual. They were more plain. They were more pale in color, more yellow. So I didn't go into such great detail. And of course you can see they're very, very thin. But if we go even in here, you'll see there are some colors. Try to get out of the light here. There's quite a lot of yellow in there. I did use some black and some browns, but I like using purple a lot. Purple, and there's some green in those shadows. But these are rendered with much less detail because I didn't have as much to work with. On this branch there was more moss and very interesting shapes. So now if you look into some of the colors here, you can see where there's a soft blending of the pencil, and then you can see the sharp edges. So where I'm describing some of the creases in the branch and some of the little modeling, I've used a harder pressure towards the end of the drawing. And you can see in here there's pinks, reds, oranges, purple, browns, a little bit of black. So what I'm hoping to emphasize here is the color palette, the number of colors for a branch that at first glance simply looks like a brown branch. Now these are both on white paper. Now you can see along the edge where the white is, but I've actually used very, very light circular strokes throughout the entire background so that it's not pure white. You can also see I've exaggerated the bit of shadow, which is actually an effect of the camera on the photograph to provide sort of a halo around the branches. So we'll look later. I can do another video when I'm working on a branch of how to model some of these different effects. But we're looking mostly at looking deep, looking for color, and looking for how the color comes across if you're working on white paper, or now we'll go to a shaded paper. What's the matter? On this drawing of the cedar waxwings, I didn't shade the background at all. I left it pure white because actually the photograph was a very, very white sky. And I think it worked really well with the contrast of the birds. Now this branch was particularly dark, and I'll show you some other ones where the branches were much more light. And it had quite a bit of moss on it. I've used several green and also blue pencils to work in the mossy areas. And as you get closer and you start to see the grain in the fabric, yeah, we're not sewing today, into the paper, and you see this, it's really too close for your eye to blend the colors properly. So as you move out, you can see how the colors start to blend together. So you don't want to get yourself in too close to your drawing because you can get the wrong idea about where it should be viewed from. But I'm going in so you can see the way the pigment is worked on the texture of the paper, and also where you can see how much purple, green, orange, yellow, different colors that I'm using here to bring out the shape there of the branch. And if I come back a little further, you can start to see also the darkening along the bottom of the branch to bring out the light source and the shading. Now, while we're going in and out like this, I do find it's helpful to actually take a picture with your cell phone, which gives you a really good picture at different points in the drawing, and then step back, because you can see where you need to bring out more contrast or where your drawing is not balanced. So I'd like to do that and step back. When I was in art school and figure drawing, one of the things we used to do if we were doing self-portrait is use a mirror, because the way you see and the way you draw is not always even, and when you look in the mirror you get a different viewpoint and you see where your drawing is off. So now we're going over to a shaded paper, and it's actually kind of hard for me to see if this is the gray, but I believe this is the gray toned paper. And these birds are sitting on a crabapple branch, and the crabapple branch was quite dark. It's dark and has almost a burgundy color to it, and they were in the shade of lots of leaves. This background is very much the way the photograph came out. All of that was out of focus, and so in just these sort of looks like northern lights, so I went along with that and then brought more detail into the leafy areas. But so now you can see the handling of this branch. We're much more into purple and burgundy in this one, lots of purples in there. I did use a white gel pencil in some areas on this drawing. I'm trying in this particular video just to stay with the classical use of the pencil. I have not used any solvents on any of these drawings, just strict classical work with the pencil. But there you can see that there's blue and there's green and there's purple in there. And again, stepping back, then your eye can begin to blend those colors together. So that's the shaded paper and the white paper. Here's a couple more drawings done on white paper. This was a more medium finish. This is not as smooth as the large Bristol paper that I showed you on the first drawings. Very, very different handling of the branch, but very different branches in the photographs I was working for. And that's one of the things that draws me to a photograph to do, is not only the bird and the attitude of the bird, but also the background or surroundings and the type of branch. Now, if you looked at the photograph, and of course I can't put them on here because I don't have the copyright to photographs, but the branch did have a purple tinge to it. I think, again, with the sort of socialized color, if you just looked at it, you'd say, well, that's a gray branch. But it was very, very interesting because of the one branch having more greens and the other one having tans and yellow in it. And then I really expanded on the purple that I was seeing in here, going into the darker purple and some black into the shadows there, the branch. I'm going to step back here a little bit so you can see a bit of the shadow of the bird in here, drawing the contrast between the white breast and the purple branch. And there's a lot of white on this bird, but you can see, I don't want to get too much into feathers today, but going in with different colors, because whites are usually not white. And then again, the blurring from the camera in the background gave this effect of these bubbles or round circles. So there's a lot of very, very light touch shading. Branch is a combination of working into the shading and then going in with the very, very sharp pencil there to draw some of the markings that we see on the branch. And look what a different branch we have here. I don't know exactly what sort of tree this little guy was sitting on. Again, I like the attitude of this bird and his big feet and the bubbly background, and I really love this branch. So this one gave me a chance to work with some very rich colors here, working the blending in with oranges and yellows and reds, and there's blue in the mosses. So again, the feature in this video is to look deep into the color. Back again to a contrast here in the shaded color, the toned paper, and the white. And I picked this one out because this was such a different challenge on the branches. These branches were completely covered with crystals of ice, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to handle that. But again, I've used the white of the paper to let it come through, and then I've gone in some of these areas. The deeper you look, you start to see some blues and purples and different colors in the ice crystals, just using a very, very soft, light touch to bring that out. But the edges were very sharp, and I used a sharper pencil in the end, or simply blended the background in against the white. And just a suggestion there of the brown of the branch peeking through, which is really what I could see in the photograph. It's very interesting the way those branches looked. So that's something completely different, where I'm not really doing bark, but just suggesting the branch underneath the ice. And I found this, I think you'll find, if you're doing a white dog or a white cat or a white background or snow, it's quite a challenge dealing with whites, because there's lots of color inside the white and in the shadows. You can see again the toned paper. You're starting off from a completely different place. And I don't think that you can see these textures, and until you put your pencil to the paper, you won't realize how different they are. Now this is a tree trunk. Again, there's a lot of different techniques here, using the blending and then also some hard edges to bring out some of the details. But again, I'm mostly focusing here on color. And I do love when I find in the bark that there are reds and oranges, yellows. You almost always find that greens and purples will help you in the shading. Again, backing off from this, your eye is going to pull those colors together and make it look more realistic than when you're up close. And then we'll look at one more. I chose these because the branches are so different, and I use these different papers. And again, I really loved the branches here, the opportunities that it presents in the drawing, because there were a lot of places where the top layer of bark were shredded off. Again, the use of the greens, purples, and blues in there, and the branches that I want the eye to see are more detailed. Here we're fading off a little bit. Now, when you're starting out, do something like this. This is just a study of a couple of ivy leaves. Don't start out by doing a bird or an animal in a landscape and try to do the whole thing. You're just going to get frustrated. I did some studies like this, just leaves. You may want to do just a bit of bark, a flower, maybe a bird by itself. I'll show you one of my early ones. That's an early little bird study. I love the attitude of the birds, and I was able to keep a light hand on the feathers, and I didn't give too much attention to the bark here. You can see that I did not go into the type of detail. And of course that can be a technique too, if you don't want the eye going too much away from your subject. So there's so many ways you can play with this, but I did not do a full background on here, or shade the whole background in, or do background trees. So when you're starting out, don't overwhelm yourself. So just do the bird, maybe the bird's head, or maybe the branch, maybe a leaf, or an apple, something that interests you enough but isn't going to overwhelm you. Now here's a drawing that's in process. And I move around on my drawings from one bit to the other, so there's no particular plan, and you're going to find your own way to do this. I've got the basic branch in here in the bottom, and you can see that I have some color laid down. Now I use this light color in the branch to give me the starting layer of pigment, although I went in with this is sort of a white pink, and I marked those areas first. But I'll just show here, if I'm just doing this really light circular motion to lay down pigment gradually. You'll see I'm holding the pencil like this. So if you start getting down into here, you're going to start getting into pressure, which you're going to want for your details, but you want to stay light and stay away. So you're just working in little circles. This gets that first layer of pigment down. And I'm going to resist the desire to see more pigment, because I know this is also going to give me a surface where I can blend colors in. So it's very, very light. And I've actually used this all throughout the branch. Now you can see that I'm bringing that color up a little bit more in that area, but just for demonstration purposes, what I want to do is just a little bit of shading in this area. So I'm increasing my pressure just a little bit here. I'm just going to stay in this area. Going out of focus there. And I'm going to go to another green, darker green, going in again with very, very light pressure, and I'm going to start working in that pigment. Now it's a very lengthy process, so of course it would be a very long video to continue to do this as I develop the entire branch. But you can start to see then I'm very subtly bringing in that darker color within the lighter color, and not just coloring over it, but I'm working around this little bit of a light area here. I'm not going to draw a line there, but I'm just going to use the shading to start bringing in a little bit more three-dimensional quality and more color in that area. And once again, this will be a lengthy process with a very light touch. I'm going to work my way through here. You can see I've put the lighter green in, so I will be doing more of this sort of modeling with the deeper color along the curve of the branch and starting to bring that up. Now here's a purple, and you can see that I've laid down a little touch of purple, so once you know where you want to go with that, you may want to go in and start deepening those colors. But again, I've got a layer down. You see I've got a layer of light purple in there, which makes the paper more receptive now and the pigment to blending, which is where you can get some of these more painterly qualities that you might get with another medium. And I'm going to be working some purple in throughout the branch, but I'm going to go into these shaded areas a little bit more with the purple. I don't want them just to be black. I want more color into those areas. Now something a little bit bold here. I'm going to work just a little bit of this sort of orange red in here, just very lightly. And I want to be very careful. It's not very dramatic on the branch. It's just a touch of warmth coming from the sun on that area. So now I'm holding my pencil a little closer to the tip, but very, very light. And you know, we often talk about keeping those pencils really, really sharp, but I also find sometimes when you get to this sort of rounded structure here, you'll feel that your pencil has a different texture to it according to whether you've got any little knobs on there or not. I find I can blend very nicely without the sharp point. If you have a really sharp point, you really need to stay back. But I can get a little closer in with these rounded points and just shade in those areas. So you can see that color coming up there. So I'm not going to do a whole tutorial on branches per se, as you can see just from the ones that I've done, and if you look at other people's work, you'll see so many approaches to doing branches, and even in the same artist. But just to give you an idea of getting the pigment down, building the layers up, glazing over, keeping the light touch, and seeing more interesting color. So I hope those thoughts are helpful. As I said, I didn't want to make this a tutorial on the drawing so much as to cover a few ideas about color, pressure, pencils, paper, and starting out with maybe one or two elements and not going for a whole drawing right away. You'll find that if you don't discourage yourself, if you stay with the simple subjects and then start adding in backgrounds, start going for more details, that you can grow with your work and not discourage yourself so that you stop drawing before you even start. So good luck with it, and we'll come back another time and maybe do a little bit more detailed tutorial.